this is going to be a good one. So there's been a trend lately of watch companies diving into their back catalogs. No, I don't just mean like vintage inspired watches. I mean, recently companies are going balls to the wall and giving us exact recreations of their greatest hits. Think the Tag Heuer 60th anniversary Carrera. Think the Breitling 806 reissue. And now both Tudor and Seiko are getting into the game with the Black Bay 54 and the 62 MAS respectively. Man, it's a good time to be an enthusiast, right? Both these watches happen to be around $3,500, so I asked myself if I wanted the ultimate vintage reissue diver, which one would I choose? Well, watch till the end because my choice might just surprise you. Hey guys, I'm Max and this is Watch Crunch, a new platform for talking watches. Seiko has received a lot of flack as of late for their quality control. Well, this is not one of those Seikos. First impressions of the new 62 MAS is good, really good. The first thing that hits you is just how well finished everything is, from the pearlescent dial to the polished markers to the ceramic bezel. It just all pops. And this isn't the first time Seiko has tried dipping into the 62 MAS pot. There was the SJE093 a few years ago, the Marine Master, which had a $6,500 price tag, a high-grade 8L movement inside, and measured at 40 millimeters by 14 mils thick. Then there was the more budget-friendly SBP watches, the 143, 145, 149. Those were sold at around $1,000 with a more pedestrian 6R movement, but still 40 millimeters by 13. And there were others, but the point is that the new SJE093 at $3,500 sits right in between them, and more importantly, gets the closest to the original proportions of the 6217 at 38 mils by 12.5. A Seiko diver under 13 millimeters? Yes, I know. They were able to do this by developing a new slimline 6L movement specifically for the King Seiko line. Specs aren't crazy with 45 hours of power rated at -10 to +15. And I guess this is one of the gripes you see online, but the one I have here has only lost a second per day for the past week. The biggest complaint though about this watch seems to be the price. There's a bit of a mental block, I think, for people paying $3,500 for a Seiko. And I get that. If you are just comparing the specs, this watch is about $1,000, $1,500 too much. But Seiko understands that if you are spec shopping, that you're not their target audience. I would think of this as the final incarnation of the greatest watch Seiko has ever made, and you'll start to understand its significance. It's like if your favorite band comes to town, you bite the bullet and you buy the ticket, even though you know you'll be like eating ramen for the next month. Because when you're standing in that crowd waving your hands around, you realize that everybody else is just a cover band. On the wrist, the SJE is every bit as charming as a vintage Seiko. The sizing is a 46 lug to lug, meaning that it fits like a glove without losing too much wrist presence. The brushed cushion-shaped case has strong angular lugs and is polished on the sides for a little bit of contrast. Layers of textures just jump out at you with a real sunbursty gray dial sporting pistachio colored lume. This is contrasted with a shiny ceramic bezel. The bezel action is best in class with great feedback without feeling too stiff. The lume is of course comically bright because it's a Seiko, and the screw-down crown provides a full 200 meters of water resistance. It's paired with a Tropic strap. Sadly, there is no bracelet option. This might look like an unassuming little Seiko to some, but to those in the know, this is perfection. Okay, let's switch gears now because for the same money, you can get into a Tudor. And not just any Tudor, what some feel like is the most authentic Tudor ever made. The Black Bay 54 is a follow-up album to probably the most popular Tudor ever made, the Black Bay 58, which went from the 41 mil of the Heritage line to 39. If 39 is good, then 37 is better, right? Well, we'll get to that. The BB54 is Tudor's reissue of their first dive watch in the reference 7922, and though it is a vintage accurate 37 millimeters, some might say that's too small today for a sports watch. But it's complicated. See, we need to talk about two things: how this watch looks and how it wears. The magic of the 54, I think, is that it looks bigger than stated size, but still wears small. It looks bigger because it has the matte black bezel to extend the visual size of the face. Next, it actually retains the 20mm lug width of the 58, so it wears more like squarish on the wrist. And the lugs, they have a straight profile, extending more than 46mm lug to lug. But it wears small because it's almost a full millimeter thinner than the already skinny 58. Very like vintage sub-like. But let's talk about some of the big differences between the 54 and the 58 and how I feel about it. It does lose that red triangle at 12 and the gilt accents on the aluminum bezel insert. This one is tough for me to swallow. The bezel now feels kind of sterile, inert. The crown is also very vintagey, small and kind of sharp to touch, and you need your fingernails to operate it versus the big crowns with fine knurling that Tudors have been known for. But there are definitely some pleasant departures from the 58 that I love. The 54 gets a gray sunburst style that is very subtle, but you definitely notice it in the light. It contrasts well with the flat aluminum bezel and just adds a hint of premiumness that the 58 doesn't have. Next, and this is a big one, it's a new Tudor model, so it sports the new T-Fit clasp. Now, I know some people won't even buy a watch without quick adjust. My wrist luckily doesn't go through rapid fluctuations like Christian Bale in his movies, but I can still appreciate a well-executed system, especially if I want to like hand my watch off to a friend to try on or something. Yes, the bracelet still has those faux rivets, but either I've grown to like them better or I'm just so exhausted complaining about them. Either way, I just don't even care anymore. On the movement front, there's absolutely nothing to complain about here. The MT 5400 with 70 hours of power, cost certified Kinesi movement, a proven in-house workhorse for the brand found in most of their three-handers. I can see that if you have a small wrist, the 54 would be a godsend. Speaking of which, the small watch trend is here, and being the sole proprietor of a 6.5-inch wrist, I am loving every minute of it. But I did tell you in the beginning I would put my foot down at the end and choose one of these. Well, this is hard. The Tudor is almost better in every way on paper. It obviously has the better spec movement. It comes on a bracelet, whereas the Seiko doesn't. And you can argue that Tudor is a more prestigious name than Seiko. But as I've always said, you don't buy watches with your head, you buy it with your heart. The Black Bay 54 is a stellar effort, but it still feels kind of like an homage watch. Because, for example, Rolex of today would never allow Tudor to have a Mercedes hand. So because the BB58 already exists, the 54 just feels like Tudor is tinkering at this point. But with the Seiko, they came close before with their reissues. It feels like this time they didn't hold back and just told their engineers to go ahead and make an exact replica of the 62 mass. And that's why if I had $3,500 to drop on a vintage reissue diver, I'd spend it on this overpriced limited edition Seiko. Guys, which one would you choose? Join the conversation at Watch Crunch. We just launched a major update fixing a lot of bugs and adding new features, so now would be a great time to check out the app. I'll see you there.